The concrete hangar smelled of jet fuel, burnt rubber, and something metallic that clung to the back of Emily Warren's throat. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, the heavy weight of her tools pressing into her shoulders like a reminder that she didn't belong. At 24, she'd spent the last 3 years climbing through a series of elite mechanics and rapid response programs, each more grueling than the last. Yet, stepping into Fort Fallen's main hangar, she felt like a small child wandering into a room full of warriors. The hangar was massive, cavernous, lined with aircraft in various states of readiness. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, cutting across dust motes that danced like motes of gold in the air. The hum of activity was almost hypnotic, airmen scurrying, radios crackling, the occasional echo of a jet engine starting. And yet, the moment Emily stepped through the wide, steel doors, the hum seemed to falter, like the building itself had paused to stare at her. Her boots made a soft, deliberate tap on the polished concrete as she moved toward the center of the room. Heads lifted momentarily, then dropped back to their work. Then came the whispers, low, barely audible at first but sharp enough to prick her awareness. "Who's she?" "She doesn't belong here." "Another trainee. Commander's gonna fix this." Emily's grip tightened on her clipboard, its contents, a mix of training records, certifications, and assignment orders, suddenly feeling heavier than steel. She had been briefed before arrival. Fort Fallen was no ordinary base. The unit stationed here was elite, handling aerospace rapid response missions that required precision, courage, and nerves of steel. She had every certification, every training module completed, yet the silent disapproval of the room made her question if it was enough. And then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, cutting through the murmurs like a metronome. Emily turned, expecting to see another mechanic, another technician, maybe someone here to guide her. But it was Commander Hartley himself. His presence dominated the space, tall and rigid in the crisp uniform that gleamed under the hangar lights. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on Emily as if assessing an anomaly in a familiar system. "Warren," his voice was firm, clipped, a sound that carried authority and skepticism in equal measure. It was not a question, it was a challenge. Emily lifted her chin, meeting his eyes without wavering. "Yes, sir, Emily Warren, reporting as assigned." He didn't smile, he didn't offer a hand. Instead, he studied her like a problem to be solved, then nodded once and gestured toward the office at the far end of the hangar. "Come with me, now." The murmurs in the room escalated as she followed, the echoes of her boots against concrete loud in her ears. Airmen glanced over their shoulders, some with curiosity, some with barely concealed doubt. Emily felt it, the weight of their judgment, but forced herself to breathe steadily. She had trained for high-pressure situations, for moments when her own confidence would be the only thing keeping her alive, and she wouldn't falter now. Hartley's office was stark, functional. A large desk dominated the center, papers neatly stacked on one side, a computer terminal blinking quietly on the other. He gestured toward the chair, but before she could sit, he slammed a folder onto the desk. The sound echoed, commanding attention. Emily froze. The folder bore her name in bold, black letters, Emily Warren, assignment file. "You weren't supposed to be assigned here," Hartley began, voice low but steady. "This unit handles the Air Force's most sensitive rapid response operations. Engineers, pilots, technicians, people who have spent years in this environment, not trainees who are still proving themselves." Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond immediately. Her voice, when it came, was calm, deliberate. "Sir, I've completed all required certifications and field operations. I'm qualified to serve in this unit." Hartley raised a hand, cutting her off. "According to this," he tapped the folder, "you might be qualified, but according to the men and women who have been here for years, you don't belong." A silence fell. Emily felt the words settle in her chest like stones. Years of preparation, endless late nights and early mornings, training until her body ached. And now, before she had even set foot properly in the hangar, she was being measured against the unspoken hierarchy, the invisible walls of acceptance. Hartley exhaled sharply, leaning against the edge of the desk. "Look, Warren, I don't know whose strings were pulled to get you assigned here, but you will have to prove yourself. Fast, and I mean very fast. The people you'll be working with, they won't trust you just because your paperwork says so. They'll trust you when you show them something they've never seen before, something exceptional." Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had learned long ago that arguments in moments like this rarely changed outcomes. Actions spoke louder than words. She would show them. She would show them. Before she could respond further, a sudden, deafening alarm ripped through the base. Red lights flashed, sirens screamed, and the rumble of approaching jets shook the hangar walls. Hartley's eyes snapped toward the main doors, and Emily's pulse kicked into overdrive. "Evac alert," Hartley muttered, his jaw tight. "No way, this doesn't make sense." Airmen scrambled, shouting orders over the comms. Emily's mind went into rapid assessment mode, training kicking in. Her gaze darted across the hangar, taking in the layout. Aircraft in various stages of readiness, maintenance bays, emergency exits. She noted the positions of her fellow technicians and the few pilots visible through the open hangar doors. Everyone moved with purpose, but panic was starting to creep in. Emily gripped her clipboard tighter. She wasn't just a trainee here. She was someone who had to act quickly, decisively, or risk being swept aside by the chaos. And yet, as she looked around, it was clear. No one expected her to do anything. The whispers and glances from earlier had disappeared, replaced by fear and instinctive survival. Hartley barked orders, his voice cutting through the alarm. "Team Alpha, secure the aircraft. Team Bravo, lock down the perimeter." He turned to Emily, his eyes sharp. "Warren, you assess Base 6 and prep any jets that can take off immediately. Move." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Base 6. The abandoned base she had noticed on her way in. The jet there had been out of service for weeks, rumored to be beyond repair, and now it was her responsibility. She didn't hesitate. Every doubt, every whispered insult she had overheard vanished. Training and instinct took over. She sprinted toward the bay, weaving past frantic airmen and the growing storm of chaos. Her boots clattered against the concrete floor, the noise drowned out only by the blaring alarms and the roar of distant aircraft engines. As she slid open the doors to Base 6, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The jet before her was battered, neglected, its panels dusty and wires exposed. But Emily didn't see a problem, she saw potential. Her hands moved almost automatically, scanning the wiring, the hydraulics, the fuel lines. Years of experience told her where to start, what to check, and what could fail at a critical moment. Behind her, the hangar erupted into controlled chaos. Shouts rang out, orders were repeated, jets roared to life. Emily's pulse was steady, focused, precise. And then, just as her fingers made contact with the first live wire, a voice bellowed from across the hangar. "Commander, Bird 3 is down." Emily froze. Bird 3 was another jet, the last working one for immediate takeoff. Her mind raced. If that plane didn't get airborne, the base's readiness would collapse, and the only person with a chance to save it was in Base 6, about to revive a jet no one thought could fly. She swallowed hard, breath shallow, and set her jaw. There was no room for fear, not now, only action. And the first step was proving, not with words but with results, that she belonged. As the alarm's wail reached a crescendo, Emily bent under the wing of the neglected jet, tools in hand, heart hammering, and began what might be the most important repair of her life. The alarm's shrill wail rattled Emily's teeth as she ducked under the wing of the neglected jet in Base 6. Sparks of light reflected off the metal panels, and the smell of ozone from the emergency power systems burned her nose. She had barely touched the wiring when a heavy hand clapped down on her shoulder. She spun around, heart skipping a beat, and found Commander Hartley towering above her, eyes sharp and unflinching. "You weren't supposed to be assigned here," he said, voice like steel against a stone wall. "This unit doesn't take people like you." Emily's stomach twisted, people like her. Sir, I am fully trained and certified. I can handle this jet. He shook his head, frustration tightening the lines of his face. According to this, he tapped a thick folder on his desk, the one she had glimpsed earlier. Your paperwork says yes. According to the men and women in this hangar, you don't belong, not here, not now, not ever. Emily felt a surge of anger, but she swallowed it. Years of military conditioning had taught her one thing above all: never argue before understanding the situation. Instead, she fixed her eyes on the folder, the same one that bore her name in bold letters. There was something about it she hadn't seen yet, something that went deeper than credentials. Hartley tossed the folder toward her. The papers spilled onto the floor with a thud. She bent to pick them up, careful not to crease anything. Charts, training logs, evaluation sheets. But what caught her eye was a page she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just her training record. It was classified, highly classified. Missions, simulations, security clearances, and even references to programs she had never spoken about with anyone, not even her closest mentors. Where did this come from? Emily whispered. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. Hartley didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back against his desk, arms crossed, his jaw tight. I don't know whose strings you pulled, Warren, or who decided you should be on my roster, but this file, it should not exist. And yet here you are, and apparently you're about to prove whether you can handle it or not. Emily swallowed hard. Her pulse quickened. The weight of the room, the judgment of the entire unit, even if they weren't watching now, pressed down on her shoulders. But she had been trained for moments like this. She had been drilled, simulated, and pushed to extremes that no one outside classified programs could understand. And the one thing she had learned was that hesitation could kill. Before she could respond, the hangar doors banged open, shaking the massive steel structure. Red lights flashed, and the deafening alarm that had first greeted her exploded once more. Overhead, the roar of engines tore through the air. Pilots sprinted to their aircraft, technicians scrambled to assist, and airmen shouted over the blaring sirens. Hartley's eyes narrowed. Evac alert! His voice was low, almost disbelieving. No, this isn't scheduled, not now. Emily felt her pulse spike. Her heart pounded against her chest as adrenaline surged. This was real danger, real chaos. She could almost hear the heartbeat of the base itself, frantic and thudding in time with her own. Hartley barked orders over the noise. Team Alpha, secure the jets. Team Bravo, lock down perimeter. He spun on Emily, sharp as a whip. Warren, assess Base 6. Prep any jet capable of immediate takeoff. Move now. The words hit Emily like a shockwave. Base 6, the bay she had already noticed, the one rumored to be abandoned, was now her responsibility. The jet inside it had been offline for weeks. It was neglected, forgotten, practically written off by everyone except her. And now, the entire base's readiness hinged on her ability to bring it back online. Emily didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the hangar, weaving between airmen, dodging cables and scattered equipment. Her boots clattered against the polished concrete, but she barely noticed the noise over the blaring alarms. She reached the doors of Bay 6, yanked them open, and froze for a brief second at the sight before her. The jet was battered. Panels scratched, wiring exposed, dust coating every surface like a fine layer of gray ash. It had been forgotten, abandoned, dismissed by every other mechanic at the base. But to Emily it was a puzzle, a challenge, and she loved puzzles. Sliding under the wing, her hands automatically scanning wires, she felt the familiar rush of focus, the kind that came only in high-pressure, life-or-death situations. Her tools clicked and clanged in her hands. She worked with precision, her eyes darting from wires to engines, from hydraulics to fuel lines. Every decision mattered. One wrong move could disable the jet permanently, or worse. Outside, the hangar trembled as the first unauthorized aircraft breached the perimeter. A low rumble vibrated through the concrete floor, sending dust into the air. Hartley barked more orders, but Emily tuned everything else out. This was her moment, the the moment she had been training for her entire life. A voice suddenly shouted from across the hangar. "Commander, Bird 3 is down." Emily froze. Bird 3 was one of the base's few remaining operational jets, already prepped for emergency deployment. Without it, the unit's response capability was crippled. Hartley's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the unfolding crisis. And all he saw, apparently, was a small, grease-streaked airman crouched under a jet nobody else thought could be fixed. Emily's chest tightened, but she didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she focused. The neglected jet in front of her had a minor fault, one only someone with her exact combination of experience and intuition could detect. Fingers flying over the instruments and wiring, she found the issue immediately. A small misaligned crossfeed conduit that would prevent the hydraulics from reaching full pressure. She knew what she had to do. The risk was high. If she made a mistake, the jet wouldn't start, and worse, she could be personally responsible for a catastrophic failure in the middle of a base-wide emergency. But hesitation was never an option. Not here, not now, not ever. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, rerouting, reconnecting, realigning. Sparks flew briefly, a sharp smell of ozone filling her nostrils. Sweat dripped down her neck, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it, forcing herself to focus on the subtle hum of the jet's systems. Every gauge, every dial, every flickering light mattered. Hartley's voice cut across the hangar again, commanding tense. "Warren, Bird 3, can you switch?" Emily didn't respond verbally. She didn't need to. She was already making the choice. She worked faster, rerouting systems manually, a high-risk maneuver that could fry the entire aircraft if not executed perfectly. Her breath was shallow, her fingers a blur. Outside, the rumble of engines and alarms intensified, the base shaking as if the earth itself were trembling with anticipation. Then, just as she flipped the final switch, a distant explosion shook the far end of the hangar. Smoke and fire licked the edges of the runway, and Emily felt a cold stab of fear pierce her chest. The base was under attack, and she was smack in the middle of it. Yet in the eye of the storm, Emily's focus sharpened. She had trained for moments like this, and as she heard Hartley call out for any available pilot to take off, she realized something startling. The only person who might save Bird 3, and possibly the entire base, was already under the jet, fingers flying, refusing to give in to fear. The weight of her presence, the file on Hartley's desk, the whispers from the hangar, they all faded. There was only one thing that mattered, proving that she belonged, that she was not just another trainee, not just another name in a file. She exhaled slowly, squared her shoulders, and prepared to make the impossible possible. The hangar shook with every passing second, and Emily's hands moved with surgical precision beneath the wing of the neglected jet. Sparks lit up the dim interior as she connected the final crossfeed conduit, rewiring the hydraulic system she'd memorized in countless simulations. Her heart hammered like a war drum against her ribcage. Outside, the deafening roar of engines and the shrill alarm created a chaotic symphony that threatened to overwhelm the senses of even the most seasoned airmen. But Emily was focused on the jet, focused on the task that mattered, bringing Bird 6, her resurrected jet, back to life. Failure wasn't an option, not here, not now, not ever. A sudden commotion drew her attention to the hangar doors. Through the dust and flaring sunlight she saw them, two unauthorized aircraft, low on the horizon, slicing through the morning sky with deadly precision. Neither bore identification. Neither had sent a signal. They weren't supposed to be there. Panic rippled through the base. Pilots rushed to their aircraft, mechanics scrambled to assist, and communications crackled with urgent calls. Hartley's voice cut through the chaos, authoritative, commanding. Bird 1 scramble, Bird 2 prep for immediate takeoff, Bird 3 is down, Warren Base 6 now. Emily felt her pulse spike. Base 6, the jet she'd been tending, was about to be the lifeline of the base. Her hands tightened around the tools, grease smearing her palms. Every second counted, and the eyes of the entire base, even if unseen, were on her. Sliding from under the wing, she stood and assessed the jet. Panels were aligned, hydraulics primed, fuel systems stable. She could hear the faint hum of life in the engine. It was ready, barely, but ready. Hartley's voice came again, urgent. "Warren, get Bird 6 airborne, move." Emily sprinted across the hangar, her boots slapping against the concrete, past mechanics shouting updates and pilots dashing toward their aircraft. The noise, the heat, the adrenaline, it all collided into a singular, electrifying moment. She reached the cockpit, slid inside, and slammed the canopy shut behind her. The instruments flickered to life, the engine growled, and the jet vibrated under her hands like a living creature sensing a predator. She worked the pre-flight checklist with lightning speed, her mind calculating every variable, every risk. The unauthorized aircraft were closing in. Alarms continued to wail. Hartley's commands echoed in her ears, fragmented by the noise, but clear enough to guide her actions. Throttle engage, systems online, hydraulic pressure stable, comm check, she hit the radio. Silence. The comm lines were jammed, someone had anticipated the base's defensive measures. Emily clenched her jaw. This wasn't just an emergency. This was a calculated attack, and she was the first line of defense. The jet shuddered as she flipped the final switch. A roar erupted from the engine, deafening, vibrating the metal beneath her. She felt a surge of triumph, but there was no time to savor it. A blast echoed from the west perimeter. Smoke and flames erupted, a fuel truck igniting in a burst of orange and black. The base's response teams sprinted toward the fire, but it was clear. The chaos was spreading. Hartley's voice rang in her headset, tense but steady. "Warren, hold it together. Bird 6 is our best chance right now. If you get it off the ground, we stabilize our defenses." Emily's fingers flew across the controls. Every wire she had reconnected, every panel she had aligned, every system she had recalibrated was about to be tested. The canopy trembled as she taxied toward the runway. Her eyes flicked to the unauthorized aircraft. They were fast, precise, aggressive. Any delay could be catastrophic. Behind her, the hangar doors opened wide and pilots scrambled into their jets. Bird 1 and Bird 2 took off, engines screaming, leaving trails of heat and urgency across the horizon. Bird 3 remained grounded, its systems unresponsive, and all attention was now on her. Emily's boots on the rudder pedals, hands on the throttle, she counted down in her head. 3, 2, 1, lift. The jet surged forward. Wheels left the concrete with a force that pressed her against the seat. Dust and debris swirled around her as she rose, climbing into the sky with precision she hadn't known she possessed. Below, the base looked chaotic, dangerous, but stable for now. As she leveled off, the unauthorized aircraft adjusted their approach. They weren't just passing through, they were testing the base, probing its defenses. One moved low, skimming the tree line, while the other climbed high, circling with predatory patience. Emily's mind raced. She had trained for scenarios like this, but never with actual lives at stake. The jet responded to her every command, a dance of metal and fire, as she maneuvered to intercept the closer threat. "Warren, status." Hartley's voice broke through the comms again, strained but steady. "Visual on 2 targets. Engaging defensive pattern," she replied. Her voice was calm, betraying none of the fear coiling in her stomach. "Bird 6 performing nominally. Systems stable. Weapons offline. Non-lethal engagement protocol only." "Good, keep it tight. Don't let them breach the perimeter," Hartley ordered. Emily banked hard, feeling the G-forces press her against the seat. Sweat streaked her forehead, but she didn't break focus. The low-flying aircraft executed a sharp turn, forcing her to adjust. Her hands were steady, precise, even as adrenaline surged through every vein. She could almost hear the heartbeat of the jet syncing with her own. Suddenly, a call came over the comms, urgent, panicked. "Commander, Bird 3 systems are down completely. The pilot cannot engage." Emily froze for a heartbeat. Bird 3 was their backup. Without it, the base's response capability would collapse entirely, and the pilot in question was stranded, grounded, watching the chaos from the tarmac. Hartley cursed under his breath. "Warren, you're our only chance to stabilize the situation. If Bird 6 can hold them off, maybe Bird 3 can be salvaged." Emily's chest tightened. She didn't flinch. She knew what had to be done. Bird 6 couldn't just hold the sky, it had to protect the base and the pilots below. She adjusted her course, lining up with the closer unauthorized aircraft, its metal glinting in the sun. Her mind calculated angles, speed, wind direction, every factor that could turn the engagement into either triumph or disaster. Then she saw it. The minor fault she had fixed moments ago, the misaligned conduit was holding. The jet's hydraulics were flawless. Every system she had touched was performing at maximum capacity, and for the first time, a spark of hope ignited in her chest. She executed a series of maneuvers so precise, so aggressive, that the low-flying intruder veered off, retreating slightly, unable to match the unexpected skill. Her heart pounded, but the adrenaline didn't let her celebrate. There was still Bird 3, still the threat to the west perimeter, still the unknown variables she couldn't control. Over the radio, a voice cracked, almost disbelieving. "Warren, you're holding them off Bird 6 stable." Emily allowed herself a brief nod, though no one could see it. She wasn't safe yet. The intruders were testing, probing, and she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Her thoughts flicked to the hangar below, to the people who had doubted her mere minutes ago. The whispers, the skeptical glances, they all faded as she realized that her actions weren't just saving aircraft or following orders. They were proving something far deeper, that she belonged. Not because her paperwork said so, not because someone in a sealed file had vouched for her, but because in this precise, terrifying moment she had risen to the challenge. As she leveled off, tracking the unauthorized aircraft with unwavering focus, a new sound broke through the alarm, a loud explosion from the far end of the base. Smoke and fire erupted near the western perimeter. The intruders were escalating, and Emily's pulse skyrocketed once more. The base was under attack in ways no one could have predicted, and she was smack in the middle of it, alone in the sky, her skills tested like never before. Hartley's voice cut through the comms, sharp, urgent. "Warren, Bird 6, intercept and hold pattern. You're our only line of defense until we can get Bird 3 operational." Emily exhaled slowly, tightening her grip on the throttle. She was ready. She had trained for this. She had prepared for moments of chaos, moments of pressure, moments where every heartbeat could mean success or disaster. And now the moment had arrived. She banked hard, jet roaring, engines screaming, and dove into the fray. The sky that should have been empty was now her battlefield. Emily Warren's boots hit the runway just as the base erupted into controlled chaos. Engines roared, alarms blared, and smoke from the distant fire clawed at her nostrils. She could barely catch her breath as she sprinted toward Bird 3, the jet grounded by a critical systems failure, and simultaneously heard Hartley barking orders. Every instinct screamed at her. Act now or risk the collapse of everything the base had been built to defend. But it wasn't just urgency driving her. It was awareness. For the first time, Emily felt the weight of expectation pressing down, not from the file on Hartley's desk, not from her certifications, but from every single person who had ever doubted her. They had whispered behind her back, sneered at her assignments, and silently marked her as out of place. And now, with the survival of the base at stake, their doubt had evaporated, replaced by desperate need. She slid under Bird 3, tools in hand, eyes scanning the intricate maze of hydraulics, wiring, and sensors. The failure was deep, more complicated than anyone had first realized. The jet's cross-feed system had been sabotaged, or at least tampered with, and no standard repair would suffice. It would require precision, courage, and speed, the kind of skill only someone intimately familiar with the system could provide. Emily took a deep breath. Her hands moved like trained musicians across the panels, reconnecting lines, rerouting circuits, calibrating valves. Sparks flew briefly, and the metallic scent of ozone and grease filled her nostrils. Sweat dripped down her forehead, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it, laser-focused. Outside, the sky was a war zone. Unauthorized aircraft roared overhead, slicing across the horizon, testing the base's defenses at every turn. "Warren," Hartley's voice cut through the comms, tense but clear. "Bird 1 and Bird 2 are engaging targets. Bird 3 is your only chance to stabilize the runway." Emily's pulse kicked into high gear. She had already started rerouting the hydraulics manually, a high-stakes procedure that could fry the system if she miscalculated. One wrong move, and the jet wouldn't respond. Worse, the base's most critical line of defense could collapse entirely. She swallowed hard, hands flying, mind calculating angles, voltages, and pressures in real time. From the hangar doors, she could see the eyes of several airmen tracking her progress. At first, they had watched with skepticism. Now their gazes were filled with something different: trust, hope, and unspoken dependence. She felt the weight of it, heavy on her shoulders, and it steeled her resolve. Come on," she muttered under her breath. Every second was a lifetime. Every connection had to be flawless. Her tools clicked and clanged in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Suddenly, a loud explosion tore through the base from the west perimeter. Flames leapt into the sky as smoke rolled across the runway. Security teams scrambled to contain the fire, but Emily didn't flinch. She had trained for moments like this. She thrived in them. This was her element: the chaos, the precision, the stakes that made hesitation impossible. Her fingers tightened around a connector as she aligned it perfectly. Then another sparked success. She rerouted the main feed and initiated the system reboot. The jet shuddered, then hummed with life. Hydraulics responded, control surfaces moved. Bird 3 was coming online. Hartley's voice crackled urgently over the comms again. "Status, Warren." "Bird 3 is responding. System stable," she yelled. "Pilot can engage." A cheer erupted from the hangar, though Emily couldn't hear it over the alarm and the roar of aircraft. She barely allowed herself a brief moment to register it. There was no time to celebrate. Outside, the unauthorized aircraft were still testing the base's defenses. One of them was maneuvering low, dangerously close to the fuel depot. Emily sprinted toward Bird 3's cockpit, sliding in just as the pilot climbed inside. "System stable," she said quickly. "Hydraulics online, cross-feed operational. You're good to go." The pilot's eyes widened, gratitude and awe mingling in his gaze. "Thanks, I don't know how you did it." Emily didn't answer. She grabbed her tools and prepared to move again. There was no time for words. The battle in the sky was far from over, and the base still needed her. Hartley appeared at the edge of the runway, watching her with something new in his eyes. Respect, admiration, perhaps even a hint of disbelief. "Warren," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "You're something else." The low-flying intruder was circling now, testing the base's perimeter, waiting for any sign of weakness. Emily's mind raced. Bird 6 had already lifted off, engaging the aircraft above. Now, with Bird 3 operational, they had a chance, but only if she could coordinate quickly. She moved to the comms panel, fingers flying over buttons and switches. Her heart raced as she synchronized the movements of Bird 3 with Bird 6. Together, the two jets formed a defensive formation, a barrier against the unauthorized aircraft. Emily felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was tempered by tension. Every movement, every calculation, could be the difference between success and disaster. The unauthorized aircraft dove suddenly, targeting the far end of the runway where emergency crews were attempting to contain the fire. Emily's stomach dropped. Without hesitation, she rerouted signals, adjusting the jet's trajectories, creating a protective cordon. Bird 6 responded flawlessly, Bird 3 held steady, and the intruder's attack was deflected. For the first time since she had arrived at Fort Fallen, Emily allowed herself to lift her head. She looked around. The airmen who had doubted her were now relying on her, watching her with wide eyes, some whispering among themselves. She realized in that moment that her entire presence had shifted. The room that had once been filled with doubt and judgment now held trust and expectation. A shout came from the control tower. Intruders disengaging, they're pulling back. Emily exhaled, muscles trembling from the intensity of the moment. Her heart pounded, but she felt a strange calm settling in. She had done it. She had saved the jets. She had stabilized the immediate threat. And she had done something even more profound. She had proven herself to a room full of people who had doubted her very presence. Hartley strode toward her, his expression unreadable, then softened slightly. "Warren, I underestimated you. Big mistake." Emily allowed herself a brief smile, though it was tempered by the awareness that the battle wasn't over. The base was still on high alert. Emergency crews were fighting fires. Intruders were retreating, but surely they would return, and perhaps with greater force. She climbed out of Bird 3's cockpit, her uniform streaked with grease and sweat. Airmen approached her cautiously, some nodding, others offering terse words of thanks. She nodded back, acknowledging their reliance without a word. Hartley placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said. "Better than well, you saved the base." Emily shook her head slightly. "I just did what needed to be done, sir." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "And that's exactly why you belong here." Her heart soared, but before she could savor the acknowledgement, a new alarm blared through the base, different from the first, sharper, more urgent. The intruders were not done. Something else was moving along the western perimeter, something Emily couldn't yet see. She tightened her jaw, already moving toward the hangar doors. This time, it wasn't about proving herself. It was about survival, and about protecting the people who had finally come to need her. The sky that had once seemed like an arena of impossible danger was now a battlefield she had to navigate. And Emily Warren, the girl who had walked into a room full of skeptics and whispers, was no longer just a trainee. She was a force the base could rely on, perhaps the only one capable of turning chaos into control. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Her fingers itched for the tools she carried, her mind raced with calculations, and her eyes scanned the horizon. The intruders were retreating, but for how long? And what would come next? Emily exhaled slowly, knowing that every second counted. The base's survival, the pilots' lives, the integrity of the mission, it all rested on her. And for the first time she realized something profound. They weren't watching her anymore. They were depending on her. The acrid stench of burning fuel and scorched metal filled the air as Emily sprinted toward the western perimeter. Smoke coiled in thick gray tendrils, dancing like sinister serpents above the chaos below. The base's emergency crews fought the spreading flames, their shouts barely audible over the shrill alarms and the roar of engines still echoing from the runway. Yet amidst the chaos, Emily felt a strange, piercing clarity. She had been underestimated. She had been dismissed. Now every second, every action mattered, not for recognition, but for survival. Hartley's voice came over the comms, clipped and tense. "Warren, the fire's spreading too fast. Explosive containment at risk." Emily's eyes flicked to the scorched perimeter. A fuel depot, partially engulfed in flames, was dangerously close to detonating. A misstep here would obliterate the runway, destroy critical infrastructure, and put dozens of lives at risk. She didn't hesitate. "On it," she said, sprinting past firefighters and airmen struggling to control the blaze. Her boots pounded the scorched concrete as she approached the first containment panel. Her hands flew, pulling emergency valves, rerouting water lines and recalibrating pumps. Sparks of electricity from damaged conduits made her flinch, but she ignored the sting. The intruders hadn't fully retreated. One aircraft, low and fast, circled back toward the western perimeter, banking sharply to test the base's defenses. Emily froze for a heartbeat, calculating the trajectory. Its path was direct. It could strike the depot within seconds. She sprinted to the nearest high-pressure hose, gripping it tightly as she aimed the jet of water at the advancing flames. The heat licked her arms and face, sweat stinging her eyes, but she held her ground. The intruder swooped lower, almost brushing the treetops beyond the base. Her jaw tightened. If it wasn't intercepted soon, the fire and the intruder would converge into catastrophe. Bird 3, intercept low-flying target, Hartley barked. Emily didn't wait for the pilot's acknowledgement. She toggled the comms, guiding the pilot with concise, rapid-fire instructions. Her fingers pressed the buttons in precise rhythm. Left bank 2 degrees, throttle 90%, cut altitude by 30 feet. Avoid heat signature. Deploy chaff if necessary. From her vantage point, Emily watched as the jet responded. The low-flying intruder banked sharply to avoid the base's defenses, narrowly missing the fuel depot by mere seconds. Relief surged, but it was tempered by the sight of secondary fires already igniting along the perimeter. The intruder had deployed incendiary devices. Emily's breath came in shallow, rapid gasps. She could hear the base's hum of activity around her, the controlled panic of trained personnel doing everything in their power to prevent disaster. And then she noticed something alarming. A crew trapped behind a collapsing fuel line, their path to safety blocked by flames. Without thinking, Emily sprinted toward them, the heat of the fire blistering her uniform. She shouted, "Move, this way!" Her voice cut through the chaos, commanding attention and action. The trapped crew hesitated, eyes wide with terror, but the authority in her tone propelled them forward. She grabbed the nearest firefighter and yanked them clear of the collapsing section just as the line twisted, erupting into flames. Hartley's voice broke through her focus again. "Warren, you can't do everything yourself." She didn't respond. There was no time. She didn't have the luxury of argument. The blaze was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Her tools, her instincts, and her courage were all that stood between total disaster and a narrow containment. Emily moved to the next critical area, the control panels regulating fuel distribution to the depot. A direct strike from the intruder would send explosions cascading across the base. She assessed the panels quickly, identifying the damaged circuits and malfunctioning valves. With precision born of countless hours of training, she rerouted power, bypassed damaged nodes, and initiated emergency shutoffs. Sparks flew and wires hissed like angry snakes, but she pressed on, adjusting and recalibrating in real time. The intruder made another pass, low and fast, testing the base defenses again. Emily's heart thumped violently in her chest as she coordinated the jet's interception. Bird 6, engage low target. Bird 3, cut altitude, intercept path. Through the swirling smoke and flames, she could see Bird 6 respond with flawless precision, forcing the intruder to climb sharply to avoid collision. Bird 3 mirrored her instructions, its pilot trusting her every call. A sudden roar shook the base. The fuel depot shuddered under the combined heat and pressure, and Emily realized the containment walls were beginning to buckle. She acted instinctively, climbing a narrow catwalk to reach the main valve, twisting it with all her strength. A hiss of releasing pressure echoed through the flames. The depot held, barely. She exhaled sharply, adrenaline coursing through every vein, but there was no time to rest. Secondary fires were erupting along the runway. Smoke thickened, obscuring visibility. Pilots were struggling to taxi aircraft safely. The intruder was circling again, preparing for another strike. Emily spotted a damaged fuel line dangerously close to another team. Without hesitation, she sprinted, using her body to shield them as she twisted valves, redirected flow, and stabilized the line. Sparks from exposed wiring licked at her arms, burning her sleeves, but she ignored the pain. The team behind her followed her lead, their hesitation replaced by the silent trust they had begun to place in her. Hartley's voice came again, softer now, tinged with awe. "Warren, God damn it, you're saving the base." Emily didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the intruder descending toward the depot. She activated the emergency flare system, signaling both jets. Bird 6 and Bird 3 responded immediately, rising in formation to intercept. Explosions from controlled charges lit the sky as the intruder banked sharply to avoid direct fire. The blaze began to stabilize. Water hoses finally brought the secondary fires under control, but the intruder wasn't done. It dove again, forcing both jets into a high-speed chase. Emily coordinated every movement, her mind a whirlwind of angles, speeds, and trajectories. Every calculation had to be perfect. One mistake could mean catastrophe. The intruder pulled a sharp maneuver, banking low, skimming the treetops. Emily's pulse spiked. She had only seconds to respond. Her hands flew over the comms. Bird 6, altitude 20 feet. Bird 3, mirror path, trap it in formation. The jets executed flawlessly, cornering the intruder above the western perimeter. Emily's heart hammered, sweat streaking her face. Then, with a final precision move, the intruder disengaged, veering sharply away from the base, retreating toward the horizon. Emily dropped to her knees, breathing heavily, the heat of the fire still scorching her skin. Around her, the base began to stabilize. Airmen emerged from cover, faces wide with disbelief and gratitude. The emergency crews cheered, the pilots returned, and Hartley finally approached her, eyes blazing with a mixture of pride and astonishment. "You just saved the western perimeter," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "Not just the jets, not just the fire, the entire damn base." Emily nodded, exhausted but focused. "It's not over yet, sir. They'll regroup." Hartley's eyes softened slightly. "I know, but right now you've proven something none of us could ignore. You belong here, Warren. Every single person in this base knows it now." Emily felt a strange mix of relief and lingering tension. She had not only stabilized the immediate threat, but had also transformed the perception of her entire unit. She had gone from outsider to indispensable, from underestimated trainee to the person everyone relied upon. As the smoke cleared, Emily glanced toward the horizon, the sky now calm but tinged with the fatting glow of explosions. She knew the intruders would return. She knew the base would face more challenges. But she also knew one undeniable truth. For the first time, she had earned a place where she truly belonged. Her name had not yet echoed through the base speakers, but in that moment it didn't need to. Every look, every nod, every silent acknowledgement from her fellow airmen carried the weight of her achievement. And Emily Warren, the girl who had walked into a hangar full of doubters, had become the anchor in a storm of chaos, the steady hand in a sea of fire, and the unexpected force that had turned despair into hope. The base was quiet now, or at least as quiet as a war machine in the aftermath of chaos could be. Smoke curled lazily from the scorched western perimeter. Emergency crews moved cautiously among the debris, and the hum of jet engines blended with the distant sirens. But Emily Warren didn't feel relief. She could sense it in her bones. The intruders were regrouping. They were out there, somewhere beyond the horizon, planning their next move. And when they returned, the base would face a storm more dangerous than the one it had just survived. Emily crouched near the scorched remnants of the fuel depot, wiping soot and sweat from her face. Her uniform was streaked with ash and grease, her hands raw from gripping tools and valves, but her mind raced faster than ever. Every action, every decision she had made so far had been a test, and the next one would be even harder. Hartley approached, his usual stern expression softened slightly, though the lines of tension never fully left his face. "Warren," he said quietly, almost to himself, "you've done more than any of us expected today. You've saved lives, stabilized jets, contained the fire hell. You've basically carried half this base on your shoulders." Emily shook her head, focusing on the horizon. "It's not over, sir. They're coming back, and next time they'll be ready for us." Hartley's eyes narrowed. "I know. That's why I need you where you belong, right at the center of operations. You're not just a mechanic anymore. You're the one who coordinates, who anticipates. If anyone can give this base an edge, it's you. Emily allowed herself a brief nod, but she didn't relax. She had learned long ago that victory in moments like this was fleeting. One misstep, one overlooked detail, and everything could unravel. She rose, moving swiftly toward the command center, where screens displayed live feeds, radar sweeps, and the latest intelligence on the intruder's movements. As she entered the command center, the room fell silent for a heartbeat. Airmen and officers who had once whispered doubts were now watching her with unspoken respect. The whispers had turned into awe, their skepticism replaced with trust. Emily felt the weight of it pressing down on her, but instead of fear, it steeled her resolve. She moved to the radar console, scanning for anomalies. The intruders were returning, and this time they weren't alone. Multiple blips appeared on the screens, moving in coordinated patterns. Jets, drones, perhaps even unmanned systems designed to sow chaos. Emily's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. Every piece of data, every movement, every anomaly had a story, and she had learned to read it. Hartley's voice cut through the comms again, firm and commanding. "Warren, what do we have?" Emily's eyes never left the screens. "Multiple contacts, sir. Low altitude, high speed, approaching from the northwest. Pattern suggests coordinated strike on the eastern perimeter. They're testing our defenses and probing for weaknesses." Hartley exhaled sharply. "You've got the situation under control." Emily allowed herself a small, tight smile. "We're not out of danger yet, sir, but we have options. If we can coordinate Bird 3, Bird 6, and the remaining operational jets, we can establish a defensive cordon and force them into predictable vectors. That's when we can neutralize the threat without risking the base infrastructure." The room shifted. Airmen and officers leaned closer, absorbing her instructions. Emily began issuing precise commands, her voice calm but authoritative. "Bird 6, climb to 20,000 feet and hold formation north-south. Bird 3, mirror path south-north. Remaining jets, patrol perimeter and relay targets. Ground crews, maintain fire containment protocols and stay ready for emergency shutoffs. Everyone else, remain alert and follow commands exactly." The plan unfolded like a symphony, each element calculated to perfection. Emily coordinated in real time, adjusting vectors as the intruders shifted formation. One drone moved low, testing the defenses near the runway. Another blip climbed high, weaving erratically to force pilots into a reactive stance. Emily's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just an attack, it was a test of skill, nerve, and anticipation. She had to predict every move before it happened. Her mind worked faster than the radar blips could move. She traced probable trajectories, estimated speeds, and calculated optimal interception points, all while coordinating multiple pilots, jets, and emergency personnel. Then the first real engagement began. A low-flying intruder swooped toward the eastern perimeter, banking dangerously close to the fuel storage. Emily didn't hesitate. She issued rapid-fire instructions over the comms, guiding Bird 3 and Bird 6 to intercept. The jets responded with precision, executing maneuvers that forced the intruder to retreat. "Good," Emily muttered under her breath, but she didn't allow herself relief. Another blip surged forward, faster, more aggressive. Emily's fingers flew over the console, directing countermeasures and defensive positions. She was the nerve center of the base, the unseen force that had become indispensable in a matter of hours. Hartley appeared behind her, watching in awe as Emily orchestrated the defense. "I've never seen anyone move like this," he said, his voice barely audible over the comms. "You're unreal." Emily allowed herself a brief glance at him. "We don't have time for compliments, sir. The intruders are escalating. This next strike is coordinated across 3 vectors simultaneously." She didn't wait. Her hands moved over the console, issuing orders with precise timing. Jets intercepted the first wave, drones were neutralized by ground-based countermeasures, and emergency crews maintained containment lines with meticulous coordination. Then came the moment of truth. One of the intruders veered unexpectedly, aiming directly at the western perimeter, the same area Emily had fought to stabilize earlier. The fuel depot, already weakened from the previous attack, was at risk of catastrophic detonation. Emily's mind raced. She had to act quickly. She issued a series of rapid commands, directing jets to intercept and ground crews to engage emergency shutoffs. Simultaneously, she moved to a secondary console, initiating auxiliary fire suppression systems and activating emergency pressure valves. Seconds felt like hours. The intruder descended low and fast. Bird 6 engaged, forcing it into a sharp climb. Bird 3 mirrored the maneuver, cutting off its escape. Ground crews executed emergency containment with flawless timing. The intruder's trajectory was altered at the last second, narrowly avoiding the depot. A controlled detonation from a countermeasure neutralized its path, sending it spiraling away harmlessly. Emily exhaled, muscles trembling, heart pounding like a jackhammer. Around her, the command center erupted into controlled relief. Officers and airmen exchanged stunned glances. The base had survived another coordinated attack, and at the center of it all, Emily Warren stood, exhausted, soot-streaked but unbroken. Hartley finally stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you've done it again. You didn't just save lives, you controlled the entire operation. Everyone here owes you more than they can say." Emily shook her head, voice calm but firm. "We all did this together, sir. The base functions as a team. I just made sure the team had a chance." He studied her, respect radiating from his gaze. "No, Warren. Today you became the backbone of this base. You're not just a mechanic anymore. You're a leader, a strategist, and, let's be honest, the person everyone will be looking to in the next emergency." Emily exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The immediate threat was over. The intruders had been repelled, the base stabilized. And for the first time, she felt the unspoken acknowledgement of every airman and officer who had doubted her mere hours ago. But even as relief settled, Emily's instincts remained razor-sharp. The horizon beyond the base remained uncertain. The intruders were still out there. They had tested the base's defenses once, twice, 3 times now, and Emily knew they would return, bigger, faster, deadlier. She glanced at Hartley, who seemed to sense her unspoken thoughts. "We'll be ready, sir," she said. "Next time they won't get past us." He nodded, his expression a mixture of pride and determination. "I have no doubt, Warren, I have no doubt." For the first time that day, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe, to take stock of what had happened. She had arrived at Fort Fallen underestimated, dismissed, and doubted. In the crucible of fire, chaos, and life-or-death decisions, she had transformed doubt into trust, whispers into reliance, skepticism into awe. And though the intruders were still out there, Emily Warren had discovered something profound. She didn't just belong at Fort Fallen. She was essential to its survival. And now the base knew it too. The base had settled into a fragile calm. Smoke still lingered over the western perimeter, the acrid scent of burned fuel and scorched metal clinging to every corner of the airfield. The remaining jets idled on the tarmac, engines throbbing softly, as if recovering from the chaos of the morning. Emergency crews moved with disciplined precision, inspecting damage, replenishing supplies, and quietly muttering thanks to each other for surviving what could have been catastrophe. But Emily Warren didn't relax. She stood on the observation platform overlooking the runway, her hands gripping the railing as she scanned the horizon. Every shadow, every glint of sunlight on distant objects, every erratic blip on the radar was a potential threat. The intruders had retreated, but she knew better. They had tested the base, learned its weaknesses, and would return, bigger, faster, more coordinated than before. Hartley appeared beside her, his usual commanding presence softened by the subtle fatigue etched into his features. "Emily, you've outdone yourself," he said quietly, almost reverently. "Bird 6, Bird 3, the entire defense plan, you orchestrated it flawlessly. Emily shook her head, eyes still fixed on the horizon. It worked for now, but this calm, it's deceptive. They're regrouping, waiting, planning. And when they come back, it won't be a test, it'll be an assault. The base won't just survive on luck this time. Hartley nodded, his jaw tightening. I know. That's why I want you in the command center. You're the best strategist we've got. We'll need every calculation, every contingency, every edge we can muster. Emily exhaled slowly, muscles still trembling from the previous engagements. She had been underestimated when she arrived, brushed aside, treated like a trainee who didn't belong. And now every eye in the base was on her, every operation hinged on her decisions. The pressure was immense but strangely familiar. She moved to the command center, where the air was thick with anticipation. Officers huddled over screens, analyzing flight patterns, radar sweeps, and intelligence reports. The tension was palpable, every whisper and click of a keyboard amplified in the quiet moments between commands. Emily didn't hesitate. She stepped to the central console, fingers flying over controls, adjusting surveillance feeds, coordinating pilots, and recalibrating defensive systems. Status report, Hartley demanded. Emily's voice was steady, calm, authoritative. All operational jets accounted for. Bird 3 and Bird 6 are mission-ready. Radar sweep indicates no immediate contacts, but secondary sensors are picking up multiple high-altitude blips 30 miles northwest, likely the intruders regrouping. Ground teams are replenishing containment systems and defensive ordnance. Base perimeter integrity is stable, but weak points remain in the eastern fuel storage and southern runway. We need proactive coverage. Hartley's eyes narrowed. Proactive coverage. Emily didn't flinch. We'll need preemptive air patrols, overlapping jet coverage, and drone surveillance over the weak points. If the intruders return, we can predict their vectors and neutralize them before they reach critical infrastructure. Timing is everything. Coordination is everything, and we need to act before they realize we've recovered. A junior officer glanced at her skeptically. And you think we can manage all that with 2 jets? Emily didn't hesitate. We don't have a choice. 2 jets, coordinated perfectly, supported by ground teams and drone coverage. We can create a network that compensates for lack of numbers. But it requires precise execution. Every second counts. Hartley nodded, turning to the officers around him. She's right. Listen to her. We follow her plan. Every instruction, every order executed to the letter. Failure isn't an option. Emily set to work. Every radar feed, every communication channel, every operational system became part of a larger, intricate web under her control. She coordinated patrols, rerouted drones, and monitored emergency crews. Every movement was calculated, every decision precise. And yet, even as she orchestrated this delicate dance, a small, nagging unease settled in her chest. The intruders had tested her, tested the base, and learned more than anyone realized. Then the first blip appeared on the main radar feed. High altitude, fast, and unmarked. Another followed, then a third. They were returning just as Emily had predicted. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a focused intensity. This was the ultimate test. The intruders had come back, stronger and more coordinated than before. Bird 6 and Bird 3, launch immediately, she commanded, voice calm but steely. Establish intercept pattern, northern and eastern perimeter coverage. Ground teams stand by for high-intensity fire suppression. This engagement will be decisive. Pilots scrambled, engines roared, and the jets lifted into the sky, answering her commands with precision. Emily's eyes flicked between radar feeds, surveillance monitors, and communications channels. Every second mattered. Every calculation had to be flawless. Hartley watched her, expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "I can't believe how calm you are right now," he muttered. Emily didn't answer. Calm wasn't the right word. Focused, determined. That was better. She had spent years training for moments like this, moments where hesitation could mean death and precision could mean survival. And now the moment had arrived. The intruders moved in formation, their approach coordinated and precise. Emily's mind raced, anticipating each maneuver before it happened. She issued instructions with rapid-fire clarity. Bird 6, intercept high vector. Bird 3, mirror low vector. Ground teams, prepare secondary containment and deploy emergency countermeasures. Drone coverage, maintain surveillance on eastern fuel storage. We cannot allow any breach. The jets responded flawlessly. Bird 6 engaged the high-altitude intruder, forcing it to alter its trajectory, while Bird 3 mirrored the maneuver, intercepting the low-flying threat. Ground teams readied fire suppression and emergency valves, every action synchronized with Emily's commands. Suddenly, a new variable appeared. An unmanned drone, sleek and fast, veered toward the southern runway. Emily's pulse surged. This was unexpected. She calculated its path, speed, and potential impact in seconds. Bird 3, divert and intercept southern vector. Deploy chaff, she commanded. The pilot executed the maneuver perfectly, intercepting the drone before it reached the runway. The unmanned device spiraled harmlessly into the horizon. Emily allowed herself a fraction of a second to exhale, but there was no time to relax. The main intruders adjusted their approach, descending in formation, attempting a coordinated strike on the eastern fuel depot. Emily's eyes narrowed. "We're ready," she muttered. "Timing is everything. Execute now." Bird 6 and Bird 3 moved as one, intercepting the lead aircraft with precision. Ground teams engaged secondary containment. Drone surveillance filled the gaps. Every element of the base's defenses functioned under Emily's orchestration like a well-oiled machine. The intruders were forced to retreat, unable to penetrate the perimeter. Their attack had been anticipated, countered, and neutralized with flawless execution. The base remained intact. For a moment, silence settled over the command center. The radar blips disappeared, the jets returned to patrol, and emergency crews moved back to standby. Emily leaned against the console, chest heaving, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Hartley stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you did it again. You didn't just save the base, you orchestrated its survival under extreme pressure. Everyone here owes you more than they can say." Emily allowed herself a brief nod. She was exhausted, burned out from the relentless series of threats, yet she felt something deeper: validation. Every doubt, every sneer, every whisper of disbelief had been transformed into trust, reliance, and respect. Hartley smiled faintly, pride evident in his eyes. "Warren, you belong here, more than anyone could have imagined, and from now on everyone will know it." Emily exhaled slowly, knowing the fight was far from over. The intruders might return again, and each encounter could be deadlier than the last. But for now, she had proven herself. Not through words, not through credentials, but through action, courage, and unwavering focus under fire. And in that moment, as the base settled into a tense calm, Emily Warren realized something profound. She wasn't just surviving the chaos anymore. She was shaping it, commanding it, mastering it. And when her name finally echoed through the base speakers, it would be more than recognition. It would be a declaration. She had arrived. She belonged. The sky above Fort Fallen was an ominous canvas of grays and blues, streaked with smoke from the fires Emily had fought hours earlier. The base had survived repeated intrusions, but the calm that had settled over the perimeter was deceptive. Emily Warren knew instinctively that the intruders would not leave the base standing unchallenged for long. This time their strike would be final, or at least, they intended it to be. Hartley's voice crackled over the comms, tension thick in every syllable. "Warren, intel suggests multiple vectors approaching from all sides. This is it. They're launching a full-scale assault." Emily's jaw tightened. She could feel every muscle in her body tense, adrenaline surging with a familiar, almost comforting rhythm. The base's survival had come to depend on her. Not just her skill as a mechanic, not just her instinct under pressure, but her ability to see the battlefield, predict the enemy, and orchestrate defense with pinpoint precision. She moved swiftly to the command center, where the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Officers and airmen hovered over consoles, but every eye turned toward Emily as she entered. The same skepticism that had greeted her on her first day had vanished. It was replaced by trust, awe, and reliance. She felt it weigh on her shoulders like a tangible force, heavy yet empowering. "Status?" Hartley asked, standing behind her. Emily scanned the radar feeds, her mind racing through every possibility. Multiple high-speed contacts, north, east, and west perimeters. Low-flying vectors targeting the fuel depots and the southern runway. Drones attempting infiltration. Jets in the air are in position but will need continuous coordination. Ground teams are ready, but this is the biggest assault we've seen. Timing, precision, and coordination will determine if the base survives. Hartley's eyes narrowed. "You can handle it." Emily didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice. We survive or we fail everyone here. Let's move." She took command, issuing rapid-fire orders to jets, ground crews, and surveillance teams. Every element was synchronized, every movement calculated. Bird 6 and Bird 3 took flight, intercepting high-altitude threats while Emily coordinated low-flying drones and ground defenses. Emergency crews prepared to engage containment systems, and the remaining operational jets formed a defensive perimeter. Then the first wave hit. Low-flying intruders swept toward the southern runway, their speed and coordination unlike anything the base had seen. Emily's eyes narrowed. She predicted their paths almost instinctively, issuing commands with a precision that bordered on preternatural. Bird 3, intercept southern vector, deploy chaff. Bird 6, high vector, cut altitude 20 feet, mirror southern approach. The pilots executed flawlessly, trusting every instruction. Ground teams engaged fire suppression systems preemptively, neutralizing incendiary devices before they could ignite. Drones flew patterns designed to confuse the intruders' sensors, creating openings for the jets to exploit. Emily's mind moved faster than the radar blips. One intruder veered unexpectedly toward the eastern fuel depot, a critical weak point. Without hesitation, she recalibrated the auxiliary containment valves, initiating emergency shutoffs and activating secondary suppression systems. Sparks flew from exposed wiring as she worked, but she didn't flinch. The intruders adapted, a synchronized maneuver designed to overwhelm the base's defenses. Multiple drones attacked simultaneously from different angles. Jets engaged, but the precision of the assault pushed every defender to the edge. Emily's pulse raced, but her hands never wavered. Every calculation she had made in hours of preparation was now in motion. "Northern perimeter compromised," a junior officer shouted. Emily's eyes flicked to the screen. A drone swarm was closing in. She didn't hesitate. Bird 6, intercept high vectors. Bird 3, flank southern perimeter. Ground teams deploy auxiliary drones to intercept remaining units. This is the moment we hold or we fail. The jets moved as one, weaving in formation to neutralize the swarm. Drones collided midair, sparks illuminating the dusk like fireworks. Emily coordinated each maneuver, adjusting angles, speed, and timing with split-second accuracy. Ground teams fired countermeasures, and every system functioned as if directed by a single mind. Then came the moment Emily had anticipated. The lead intruder, a sleek, high-speed craft, broke formation and dove toward the central control hub, the heart of the base. Hartley's face went pale. Emily's jaw tightened. Bird 3, intercept now. Northern vector, full throttle, cut altitude, deploy flare. The pilot responded instantly, weaving into the trajectory of the intruder, deploying flares that forced it to alter its path. The intruder's momentum carried it perilously close to the control hub. Emily's pulse pounded. She could feel the weight of the entire base pressing on her shoulders. Every second, every command, every calculation mattered. Then she noticed a secondary threat, A drone, undetected until now, moving directly toward the southern runway's fuel depot. Without thinking, Emily grabbed the emergency override, rerouted power, and activated the final containment protocols. The drone collided with a barrier of high-voltage countermeasures, exploding harmlessly away from critical infrastructure. Hartley exhaled, disbelief etched into his face. "Warren, how are you even?" Emily didn't answer. She was already moving to the next threat, recalculating trajectories, issuing precise commands, coordinating every jet, every ground team, every defensive measure. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every maneuver, every interception, every countermeasure had to be flawless. One miscalculation, one hesitation, and the base could be destroyed in a heartbeat. Emily's mind worked like a finely tuned machine, orchestrating chaos with meticulous precision. Finally, the intruders began to retreat, their formation breaking under the coordinated defense Emily had directed. The jets pursued just long enough to ensure the enemy's withdrawal, and then returned to patrol positions. The radar blips disappeared, leaving only the exhausted but intact base behind. Silence settled over the command center. Airmen exhaled, some collapsing in relief. Hartley finally stepped forward, eyes bright with pride and awe. "Emily Warren," he said, voice ringing across the room. "All personnel, report to the main announcement speakers. I have a message for every single person in this base." Emily froze for a heartbeat, disbelief flashing across her face. Then she heard it, the base speakers crackling to life. A voice, steady and clear, echoed across every hangar, every runway, every barracks. "Attention all personnel. Today, one individual has gone above and beyond, saving Fort Fallen from multiple coordinated threats. Her skill, courage, and determination have proven invaluable. Let it be known, Emily Warren belongs here, and her actions have ensured the survival of us all. Let her name echo through these halls as a reminder of bravery and excellence. Emily Warren." A roar erupted across the base. Airmen cheered, officers saluted, and the energy of relief, pride, and respect washed over Emily like a tidal wave. The doubts, the whispers, the sneers of the past hours or days or years were gone, replaced by universal acknowledgement of her worth. Emily felt her legs weaken, the weight of adrenaline and exhaustion finally crashing down on her. Hartley stepped forward, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You've earned this, Warren. Every single person here knows it now. You belong more than anyone could have imagined." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had arrived at Fort Fallen doubted, dismissed, underestimated. And now she had proven beyond question that her presence was not just necessary, it was vital. The base was alive with movement, celebration, and relief, but Emily's eyes scanned the horizon. She knew the intruders were still out there somewhere, regrouping. The threat was never fully gone, but for the first time she felt an unshakable truth. No matter what came next, she had the skill, courage, and leadership to face it. Hartley's voice cut through the noise, softer this time. "Emily, take a breath, you've earned it." She exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. Around her, the base buzzed with activity, each airman and officer now aware of the force they had in her. Emily Warren, the girl who had walked into a hangar full of doubters, had become the anchor, the strategist, and the hero of Fort Fallen. And as her name echoed through the speakers, she finally allowed herself a smile. She had arrived, she had belonged, and no one would ever doubt it again.